Momma tried. Momma tried to raise me better, but her pleading I denied. That leaves only me to blame, 'cause Momma tried. Merle Haggard. On Friday, before I headed back to the halfway house, I hitched a ride to my parents' friends, Mike and Joan. My dad had been one of Joan's brother's best friends growing up back in Kentucky. They used to race their cars and drink moonshine while avoiding the police until my dad dropped out of high school to join the Air Force at 17. Joan stayed at home, the traditional housewife expected from her generation, cooking, cleaning, child care, and running the house and the finances. Like the women in my family, she'd pick up work as needed, whether it was waitressing, cashiering, or office work. Mike was a big wheel in a casino on the Strip who wore a suit and tie and kept tabs on millions of dollars, hundreds of dealers, croupiers, and gamblers. He was a quiet, even-headed guy, but powerfully built. He looked like he could handle a rowdy gambler if security couldn't. To me, he was like the uncle who loved to collect gadgets and work on stuff in the garage. Their two daughters, Becky and Gina, were wild. One was a year older than me, and the other a year younger. I took the youngest one, Gina, to see Blue Oyster Cult at the Aladdin when I was a senior. We spent vacations together going camping and panning for gold, or we'd go spend the weekend at their house in Vegas, hanging out and watching television while the adults went out gambling. They were both beautiful and cool city girls, and I was an awkward non-drinking dork from a mining town. They lived in a ranch-style house in a suburb built in the 60s like any other city that saw a population surge from baby boomers coming of working age. When I got to the house, both he and Joan were home. They'd always been good people, the kind of people who would drop everything and come fetch you off the highway when your truck broke down, which they did. When I rang the doorbell, I felt like I was disturbing them, and I should just go back to the halfway house, make myself invisible again. I'd been sweating, and the thirst I had was working hard. The heat like that can make a person haze over and feel gauzy. Before I could turn away, the door opened, and the cold air rushed over me. Joan stood there. A small grin crossed her face. It made me grin, too, and I felt the same old welcome. "Hey, how are things doing? Can I get you some iced tea?" she said. "Doing okay," I said. "I'd love some tea. Get on in here before the heat kills you over." I went into a house I'd been in dozens, if not hundreds of times. They had a big sectional couch and two puffy recliners we kids used to pile on and watch movies, with a big wooden coffee table that was piled with magazines. They had a VCR when no one else we knew did. I felt like a teenager again, visiting, and everyone was about to show up or walk around the corner or come in from the back room or the backyard, where we'd all be grilling burgers and hot dogs and eating deviled eggs and ambrosia. Joan was one of those old country women who didn't give two fucks about your feelings when she told you what she thought, and would say as much in the same breath. I half expected her to tell me what a fuck-up I'd been by hanging around with fools, and I should have known better given the fuck-ups in my family. She didn't know. Mike came in. "Oh, hey, there you are. Did you want some tea?" He greeted me as if I was still a gawky teenager instead of a convicted felon who had been released into a halfway house on Monday. A year and a half ago, I'd been a Soldier of the Year, Top Gun tanker with the Army National Guard. That came to an end when a friend started to steal the weapon from my unit's armory where we'd both been soldiers. And instead of alerting the first sergeant, I helped hurry it along. Soon, I was arrested in the armory right after I helped him sell it to get rid of it. I spent a lot of nights in my prison bunk thinking about my stupidity and having to try to explain it to friends and family. A clatter of ice into glass came from the kitchen. "I'm getting it," Joan called. He motioned me to sit on the couch as he sat in the recliner. Joan came into the living room with a glass of tea and a plate with a ham sandwich. She set it on the coffee table and motioned for me to sit down. Like my mother and grandmother, if you show up at their house, they gave you something to eat and drink. We made small talk. They asked how the job hunt was going. I asked how the girls were. Their oldest was getting married, and the youngest living with her guy and working. No grandkids yet. They asked about where I was staying, and when I told them, they looked concerned, knowing it was a neighborhood of low-flying police helicopters and drive-by shootings. They asked how my family was doing. When I said I hadn't had a chance to visit them yet, they nodded. Joan said, "We haven't seen them since what happened. Your mother just closed herself up. Mid-bite of a ham sandwich, a chill flowed through my heart. While I worried about my mom and knew what had happened was difficult for her, hearing Joan was the witness testimony of her closest friend that made it real and breathing in the world. I hurt my mother. I changed her. Joan refilled the tea. I was glad I'd come. It wasn't as bad as I'd feared. In fact, it was reassuring. I'd been stressed about meeting friends and family and the awkwardness of talking with them and the inevitable questions about prison or, "What the hell were you thinking? I told you not to hang around with bad people," lectures. But this was mostly loving. "Gosh, we haven't seen you in so long. How are things now in the present moment for you? We know you had it hard, so hard. Can we help?" And they did. They relieved me from an overwhelming sense of shame, at least for a moment. As I ate, Mike asked, "Any leads on work?" "Not so far, but I'm trying to get on as an apprentice at the Electricians Union Hall." I'd worked as an electrician at Bourne Federal Prison Camp for 10 months and figured that experience would help get me some work. "That's good trade. With the way they're building, you'd never be out of work around here." When I finished eating, Mike and I went out to the garage. He had an old 10-speed bike with the swoop-down handlebars. The paint had faded with age, and the chain needed some oil, which Mike applied. It had a headlight and a tail light that were both powered by an electric generator the size of an electric toothbrush handle. It also had a rack on the back to strap things on. In those days, you could ride a bike back and forth across Vegas fairly quickly. I'd done it quite a bit before my arrest. In fact, I technically owned a bike still, at least in theory, but I was sure it had either been impounded or stolen. I'd ridden it to the armory and locked it to the bike rack when I'd gone to see the battalion commander. He had requested a meeting, so I went. Inside his office were 2 agents of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, who read me my rights and cuffed me for my role in covering up the machine gun for my friend. They led me across the assembly hall and out into the bright April light, where cameras and reporters from local television stations awaited me. The perp walk, now the equivalent ridicule of pillory and public flogging. Looking back, I'm sure the agents called ahead and arranged for the drama of a made-for-TV moment. My bike, though, remained there. I didn't feel the need to go back now to see if they kept it safe for me. As the military saying goes, gear left adrift is a gift. I knew someone had bolt cutters and removed it, and my bike was probably found its way into a garage not unlike Mike's. Before leaving, I asked for their daughter Gina's number so I could give her a call. We'd been closer in age, so spent more time together. It'd be good to hang out and catch up. I felt as if I were turning a corner now. I felt I was able to start seeing people I'd known when I was free. As I pedaled away into the hot day on the suburban street with its manicured lawns, though, I didn't think about catching up with friends. The memory of my arrest flooded my system. The panic of television crews wondering if my dad and my mom would catch the news. They did. I was sure they'd wonder where they went wrong. I bet they wondered when I became a criminal. How did a straight-laced boy from high school unravel? Had I always had a criminal's heart, simply repressed, or was I just a good boy gone astray? Maybe some of both. I can only imagine my mom's steely-eyed stare and her face set as if in a Depression-era FSA photograph as she watched the television. Today, decades later, people ask me how it all affected my mother. All I know is what Joan told me that one afternoon I showed up at her door. My family and I have never talked about it. What I do know is that my mother had once been so proud of me, the first grandson to graduate from high school, although I was 4th oldest behind my cousins. I was the first to go to college and had been an exemplary soldier, the honor graduate from my basic and armor training, battalion top gunner, soldier of the year. She never said, but how can it not hurt to see her oldest son reduced to an ex-con with an other-than-honorable discharge? I realize my mother is a mystery. The silence. What can you say about the implacable quiet? Maybe it's because of her austere religious upbringing, or her oaky roots of no use complaining. Nothing to do but salvage what you can without belly aching. Sort, pack, load the truck, and let's get on out of here to find work. Though stoic, my mother liked to laugh at family stories. like her father, who was always up to some kind of youthful mischief and sometimes found himself in the small town jail. And before he was married, was so charming, girls brought him cakes and other treats while he served out his time. Or my father's father and his uncles, who ran moonshine during Prohibition and rumors of gunfights and backwoods killings. Perhaps she saw some fate in one of her sons going to prison, just part of the bargain. It took me years to come to grips and understand what incarceration had revealed to me. While my family became more law and order, more tough on crime, and more war on drugs, the cruelty and punishment for punishment's sake and pro-death penalty as revenge and not deterrence, I became more about rehabilitation and prevention through social change, more education and programs to help with addiction and mental health and reduce sentences, finding ways to help integrate people back into society and ways to help families of those caged. My incarceration to them I'd brought upon myself. They tried to raise me better, but now I was a bleeding heart liberal and a fool who didn't understand that only punishment can stop crime. She never said it directly to me. My mother said things when the family talked politics. You were either good or bad. There wasn't any in between, which, given our family history had a lot of grays, made no sense. But it is my fault, too. I didn't talk about my time in prison and what I'd learned from it with them. Even as I sat on the couch in a halfway house after returning from Mike and John's, looking at the bike I'd brought in to keep from being stolen, I had no thoughts of talking about my experiences. Who cared? No one I knew. I wanted to find a job, a girlfriend, and put it all behind me. I stayed in my philosophies and rhetorical arguments. I felt shame in bringing it up. Always something catches in my throat. Even now, as we talk about the weather, or how the flowers are blooming, or catching her up on my daughter's shenanigans, my silence extends around me like a pool of cold air.